Hello and welcome to my channel. I will be talking about childhood dementia in this video. I'm just kind of stepping away from Alzheimer's disease today, but I want to kind of touch on this as it's become kind of recently important and something that needs to be shed some light on. So the article that we'll be discussing in this video today is called "The Collective Burden of Childhood Dementia: A Scoping Review." This is a paper written by Christina and John et al., written in or published on November 2023. So we can begin by just talking about what childhood dementia is, and as you can probably already tell by the title itself, it has something to do with cognitive decline because we know what dementia is. But this cognitive decline is something that is not supposed to be paired with another word, which is child. This is something that's very common in older people. It's kind of more intuitive to happen in older people, but not children. So in this video, we shall be discussing that and understanding why this occurs. So what is it? So as we know, it's a type of dementia, and we know that dementia is basically a neurocognitive decline, and usually it's affected by movement disorders. But in this particular case, we also have metabolic abnormalities. The thing about childhood dementias is that they're monogenic. And what does monogenic mean? That means that most of the disorders that are well known, that are characterized under the umbrella of childhood dementia, tend to originate from one single mutagenic gene, or a mutated gene. And because of that, it's kind of implied that they shouldn't, because there is a lot of disorders that are characterized as childhood dementias, but they're kind of like, they have their own names. In this specific paper, based on their hypothesis, they posit, therefore, they hypothesize that although the monogenic childhood dementia disorders are individually rare and ultra rare in frequency, including an increasing number of novel genetic origin, which means that there's an increasing number of new genetic disorders that are occurring, that are from places that are unknown. So most of the known disorders that exist now um, have a common genetic origin that can be traced and kind of understood, and therefore make it easy to treat. But now we have an increasing number of disorders that have a novel genetic origin, meaning they have an unknown pathway as to where they came from. So when considered collectively, their incidence is high and associated with an extraordinary share burden of disease. So what is this sentence saying exactly? So it's basically saying that although we do know in the gist, although we know that it is not as common, the fact is there is a lot of diseases that are classified under this general term of childhood dementia, but within those specific diseases, it's not very common. Like, you don't see a lot of people who are inhibiting those diseases. However, the fact is there is an increasing number of people who are coming with these ultra rare disorders that are classified under one specific disease class, if that makes sense. So basically, like, they all have childhood dementia, or a different variant of childhood dementia, but it's kind of not, it's its own place, instead of being classified as its own childhood dementia. So like, if you want to do studies, for example, you can't really do a study that kind of encompasses the entire disorder. You have to do studies that encompasses the specific variants of this disorder, and that's going to take forever. And if that's the case, then most clinical trials are not going to be happening, because no pharmaceutical company wants to fund all these trials for these all specific genes. Instead of classifying it under a childhood dementia um, um, category, and basically just going from there, so that you can kind of like try to attack multiple birds with one stone. That's essentially what they're trying to understand here. So, what is known? So, about 170 genetic childhood dementia disorders identified. Of these, 25 were analyzed separately as treatable conditions. Collectively, currently untreatable childhood dementia was estimated to have an incidence of 34.5 per 100,000. So what does that mean? About 1 in 2,900 births, median life expectancy of 9, and prevalence of 5.3 per 100,000 persons. This has been related to childhood cancer, which is basically has a morbid rate of up to 14 years, and approximately 70% of these deaths will be prior to adulthood. So, furthermore, we know that the beginning of this thing is usually beginning of the median age of which it is which the disease is uh, manifested or recognized or diagnosed is about 2.5 years, and this can range from 2.5 to 4 years. Some studies have stated that the median age of onset can be up to 6 years. So what does this tell us? Sometimes the baby can come out normal, and without further investigations or assessments, you wouldn't know that what the baby has when it's already too late. So that's one factor about this disease that we have to kind of take into account. I will explain more at the as the video ends, but you can understand that this first and foremost, it takes forever. It takes a while for it to be for it to be discovered, even though it could have been already from the beginning of life was already manifesting. So if we can figure out how we recognize it when it's at that stage, then we can attack it better, right? So many known disorders are known to be associated with this type of dementia. Most of them are also comorbid with other diseases in the body, such as movement and metabolic problems. So what does this mean? This basically means that just because we have a lot of problems here that are associated with the brain problems, such as neurodevelopmental and even neuromuscular developmental as well, where it's you have problems with movements. You also have to take it into account that these diseases also come with metabolic problems, whereby they are not able to use they're not able to metabolize things in their body correctly. So that also has to be taken into account. Some of these disorders that are classified under childhood dementias are treatable. A notable example is and urea. This is basically a disorder whereby the body is not able to process an amino acid known as phenylalanine, and it's usually ultra. I would say that it's not very common, but it's also very treatable. Whereas if it's not, it can lead to the same manifestations of of childhood dementia. And once it's gotten to that stage, it's already too late. But what it is basically if the body is not able to process or digest this amino acid phenylalanine, it builds up in the body and becomes toxic. And then if it's toxic, it starts killing neurons, and then that's when you have the disorder. So what is usually recommended is if it's seen, the parents will be told to kind of limit the amount of foods that contain this phenylalanine to enter the child's body. So there is a call to classify all these different diseases under one umbrella to make studies more comprehensive, because the studies want to ensure that once they capture one thing about this disease or disease modifying pathway, at least it can apply even people who are already in the late stages. So of note, estimation of mitochondrial disease incidence presented a unique disease-specific challenge given their genetic heterogeneity and pleiotropy. Childhood dementia can be a component of at least 12 clinical categories of mitochondrial disease and can be caused by pathogenic variants in more than half of over 300 genes known as underlying mitochondrial disease. Leigh syndrome alone can be caused by pathogenic variants in one or more than 89 different genes, both in the nuclear and mitochondrial genome. The mitochondrial uh, uh, genes are been have been classed to be about 2/3 of the reason why people showcase this disease. So in 2/3 of cases, it's usually a mitochondrial gene disorder. So that's something that also has to be looked at. The fact is, some of these disorders, some of most or 66% of the cases that are related with this disorder are mitochondrial in nature. And treatments have to be focused towards kind of looking at that. Most of the other causes are usually aberrant muta, mutated gene variants. All right, so the nitty gritty is the mean life expectancy was estimated to be about 16.3 years. This translates to the prevalence of 5.3 per 100,000 persons. And this year, it estimated that 1394, 3,568, and 17,000 people were living with childhood dementia in Australia, UK, and USA, respectively. So the median age is 9 years. Approximately a third reach 18, and 10%, only 10%, reach 50. So it's very debilitating, and it's important that I kind of delineate the difference between Down syndrome and this, and why it's not the same. Because Down syndrome is a disease that deals with a specific, well-known gene, and that is in chromosome 23, whereby we have an extra copy of a gene there, and that's why Down syndrome happens. And people who have Down syndrome tend to live very long, and none, not bad lives. Usually, they tend to kind of mold their way into society. But with this disorder, where you have people who are less than likely to make it to 30, it's obvious that some intervention has to be happened and has to be taken, and that this is very, very different from Down syndrome. Unfortunately, there's no treatments for this disease, as most of the drugs that are available are just kind of geared towards symptom alleviation, as well as so for people who have behavioral problems, such as psychological and mood disturbances, that can be dealt with medicine, as well as anti-epileptic drugs that could be treating the epilepsy that could be a side effect of the disease that they have. And as notable, PKU is one of the treatable ones. And the most important thing is that it has to be caught early. I want to go back to this study actually. In the discussion, there is a prominent culture that develops this, and it's the Ashkenazi Jew, according to the study. I just want to bring that to, okay, here it is. So, to begin, so of such countries including Australia, UK, USA, and Western Europe, some ethnic groups have high incidence of the disorder. The Ashkenazi Jewish population, for example, has a very high carrier rate of Canavan disease, Tay-Sachs disease, Niemann-Pick disease type A, and mucolipitis type 4, which gives parents with Ashkenazi Jewish an approximately twofold higher risk of having a baby born with childhood dementia disorders. Preconception carrier screening programs in Jewish communities in Australia, Canada, USA, and Israel have resulted in markedly reduced incidence of these disorders. So the fact is, at least the fact that these countries, which are basically developed countries, they're less. There's always a less of a chance because of the fact that they have very advanced screening programs that capture these diseases at early ages, which is the best time, and they treat them and kind of prevent them from becoming any worse than they need to be. So, a UK study found higher rates of PIND in people of South Asian descent. So, PIND, what is PIND? Okay, so to go back, PIND is a progressive intellectual and neurological deterioration, as well as childhood dementia. This is known as childhood dementia. Okay, so let's go back to that. All right, so a UK study found high rates of PIND in people of South Asian descent. South Asian descent. And an Australian study found a high prevalence of mitochondrial disorders in people of Lebanese descent, as shown by the success of the carrier screening in the Ashkenazi Jewish population and emerging evidence from the Australian Reproductive Genetic Career Screening Project. So it seems that it's very, very prevalent in Ashkenazi, Lebanese, and some South Asian populations. They tend to carry these aberrant genes that can cause the disorder. I mean, not all of them, but it seems that it's common in these populations. Is all I'm going to say essentially. Okay, so I just want to touch on to what their thoughts are on treatments. Just furthermore, so there is gene therapy technologies that are being tried right now that seem to be showing promise. Childhood dementia disorders are currently active as of June 2021. Two gene therapies have received regulatory authorization: Skysona for cerebral XALD and Leap Melody Orchard Therapeutics for metachromatic leukodystrophy. However, reimbursement and access to these expensive therapies remains a challenge. That's one of the biggest challenges too. The fact is, some of these therapies are quite expensive. So other therapeutic approaches being researched for childhood dementia disorders target neurodegenerative mechanisms such as neuroinflammation, mitochondrial dysfunction, lipid accumulation, lysosomal dysfunction, and neuroprotective pathways with small molecule drugs. So as you can see, most of these are just kind of symptom alleviation drugs, nothing really looking at the main problem. Despite research that suggests overlapping disease mechanisms among the various childhood dementia disorders, developmental of drugs into clinical trials to date have focused on one disorder in isolation. That's what I was saying earlier. Drawing attention to the childhood dementia disorders and their common attributes will lead to concurrent research on multiple disorders and therefore enhanced efficiencies and greater benefit for children with dementia. So that, all in a nutshell, is that the reason why this has gotten to the point that it's gotten to is because most of the studies were just geared to focusing on one disorder in isolation. So if we can just kind of improve the um, the scope by which these disorders are looked at, in which that in with knowing that they have many overlapping causes, it can kind of lead to a greater chance of most of these pharmaceutical companies taking the leap to do clinical trials. It's not very common in middle income countries, but it's also not very well known, but it is a common thing. So it can be expected that it is very common in underdeveloped countries. There is also ERT medications that can be used to kind of alleviate some of the diseases that are well known. ERT is enzyme replacement therapy. As you can see, since these some of these diseases are genomic in origin, usually genes are responsible for enzyme production. So genes are the codes that kind of give enzymes the instructions to do what they need to do. So basically, since this disorder is based on those genomic conditions, applying enzymes or transferring different enzymes to people can be seen as a treatment. So, but just because that exists does not mean that it works. So, what is this saying? 5 ERT medications are currently involved for use. However, 4 of these therapies are only given intravenously and are unable to cross the blood brain barrier. If it's not able to cross the blood brain barrier, it means it's not able to prevent the disease from progressing within the brain, and therefore it won't really be doing as much to help with the neurocognitive, but it could help with the body and the systemic issues that come from some of these diseases. So the fifth product, Branuria, delivered intraventricularly, targets a type of Batten's CLN2. That's a type of syndrome. It has been shown to slow progression of motor and language capacities. I can find. Let me find the actual so that it's more clear. Okay, so the fifth product, Branuria, delivered intraventrically targets a type of Batten's disease. It has been shown to slow progression of motor and language deficits, although no long-term studies have been performed to date. HSCT is a treatment option in some cases for a select number of disorders, including metachromatic leukodystrophy, Krabbe disease, MPS 1 and MPS 2, XLD, but has proved ineffective in multiple other disorders. HSCT is most effective if performed pre-symptomatically, and risks versus benefits must be weighed up on an individual case basis. So that's the thing. Prevention is one of the most important themes when it comes to neurodegenerative diseases. If it can be found earlier, it can be cured. All right, so that's basically going to be the paper for today. Again, this is, I'm going to put the link in the description, but it is called The Collective Burden of Childhood Dementia, a scoping review, written by Christina, John, Michelle, Dominic, Megan, Madeline, Magda, Nicholas, as well as the Childhood Dementia Working Group. Actually, there is some good news actually that I should pass on in this video, and this is the child from the Childhood Dementia Group here. The initiative started in 2020, and they plan to help understand families that are impacted with this disease, not just the biological aspect of it, but the sociological aspect of it, as well as the health issues that could come from this, whether it comes from the child or whether it comes from the caregiver. So it's kind of just important to shed light on this so that we can capture these diseases. One more time, I just want to bring attention to this because I know that these disorders are going to be a problem in the future. So it's important that I kind of shed light as much as I can. And I'm going to keep posting as many videos as I can to kind of just get more attention on this subject, because I don't think I see as much um, lenses put on this. And the fact is, we are all aging, and one day we will be in that age, in that stage where we can't really control anything. And I find that that's very, very, very sad. So my mission is to just post as many videos as I can to help shed light and hopefully be the seed to somebody figuring out how we can cure these diseases. Thanks for watching.